Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Traffic School Podcast. I am your host, Chris Pope, and today I want to go through kind of review James Lucero's Master Wolfer book. I got this through a recommendation through in Clint Locklier's Eastern Wolfer book. I'm trying to think if it was mentioned in O'Gorman's Hoofbeats of a Wolfer. I can't remember. And then there's a variety of people on Trapper Man in different places that suggested or recommended this book. So I sent off, you have to order it directly from Mr. Lucero in New Mexico. I will post the information on how to do that below. I'll also post it, I've already posted it on Instagram and Facebook, but I will repost it. I just took the way that I found to order it, honestly, was on Trapper Man. I did a search for Master Wolfer James Lucero, and one of the Trapper Man posts that was posted in May, I believe it was posted very recently, had Mr. Lucero's email, or not email, he's all snail mail, but contact information and how to order it. And so I just sent off a check through the mail to him and got the book back personalized. He signed it, so that was pretty neat. So I'm going to get into that in just a minute, but I wanted to talk about kind of something that I'm really excited about is this is the start of it, hopefully, but here is a pair of Springbok, I'm calling them accent pillows. I've had a sewing machine. If you've been following me very long, I purchased a sewing machine the end of this past trapping season, and that's what I've been sewing my trapping bags on, and I've been tinkering around with sewing leather with it and hope to sew some fur with it as well. A lot of the fur that I caught this season, I sent off, I wouldn't say a lot, probably about half maybe, to have tanned, and I'm hoping it's going to be back any day now, and I can kind of put some projects in the works. But with this sewing machine that I got, it was kind of a maybe what you would call a prosumer, I guess, if in the photography world. It's not kind of a semi-industrial machine. But what I didn't realize, I hadn't really done enough research, honestly, with particularly with leather sewing things, is it's a presser foot machine, and with some of the leather, especially, so kind of what I started off, I guess I need to back all the way up from the get-go. You may have heard this if you've listened very long, you probably have, but with the poor fur market and in general lack of southern fur market, southern interest in fur, last trapping season, not this past trapping season, but the season before last, instead of, I sold some of my fur, but I did take some of it and have it sent off and tanned as leather, so hair off, and dyed in some of, well, I took it down now, but that's some of what has been hanging behind me in a lot of my videos is some beaver and otter and bobcat and coyote that was tanned for the leather. So here's a beaver. You can see it's rounded. And so my idea being that the southern fur is not necessarily top quality, but I've never seen anybody do anything with leather, and it seems to be especially kind of local or handcrafted or kind of a craft leather market, and smaller mom and pop type leather places and leather workers has seemed to become popular lately. And so I thought, well, maybe I can kind of capitalize on that with a twist of using fur bearer leather that might have might get other trappers and even hunters' attention as just being something different, and also maybe find an outlet where I can do more with my fur than just ship it off and cross my fingers and hope for $2 or $3 at best, on some items. And that's, some southern fur goes for more than that, but it is disheartening when you get $2 coyotes. And so that's where all of this started. So initially I was like, well, I need something that I can, if I can machine sew leather. I've been tinkering around with the leather work. This is really getting drawn out, but I've been tinkering around with the leather work and hand sewing, and that's fine. But if it, I have to punch the holes, you have to glue things together, punch the holes, and then go back and hand sew, and it's a pretty intensive process, time intensive process. And so I got to thinking if I could do it with a sewing machine, that would speed me up, help my production. And I'm sure like all of y'all, time is awful valuable, and I'm sitting out here at 9 o'clock at night after all my family's gone to bed filming this. And so I really don't want to spend. I want to spend not as least amount of time, but I want to minimize the time I'm spending on this stuff and kind of maximize output. So anyway, long story, a little bit longer probably. My wife went to a big sewing shop actually in Atlanta, and they had a variety of machines. And actually, until we just went recently, didn't realize how many machines they have. They had this one used machine, and it would sew my bag fabric, and it would also seem like it would sew leather. And so I got it home, and it sews my bags fine, perfect. But with the leather, and what I started off with, because I didn't have any of my fur leather initially, so I bought a deer hide, just a tan deer hide to kind of practice with. Well, deer hide is very soft and supple, and so with that presser foot machine, and if you're not familiar with a sewing machine, it may not make a lot of sense, but I never dreamed that I would be this familiar with a sewing machine. But that presser foot machine just didn't, the soft, supple leather didn't feed right. It would bind up, and it just didn't look good. Didn't make a good stitch, and I didn't like the quality that it was producing. So kind of got disheartened with that. Worked fine for my bags, and so anyway, a week ago, we wound up going back to that store and just asking. I noticed that Tandy Leather had come out with their own sewing machine, so I'd kind of been eyeballing that. We went to this sewing machine store, and I just asked the guy, I'm looking for something. So what I figured out was really I need a walking foot machine. And a walking foot, instead of with the presser foot machine, you've got a feed dog on the bottom, and then the presser foot, and it kind of feeds it, and it kind of chews it up. I'm not very good at illustrating this, but the walking foot machine, it squeezes it and it pulls it, and then it squeezes it and it pulls it, and so it feeds a lot better. I don't get the scuffs and the mars on the leather. And so they actually had a large variety of walking foot and kind of machines that really would suit my needs more than I ever expected. So like I said, long story longer, I wound up making an investment in one of those machines. I've got to sell my other machine, but pretty significant investment. But I'm really hoping that with some of this stuff, my main goal here is I would really like to try to come up with a market for our southern furs. Is what I'm getting at. That's where this whole story is going, is between the leather, between these. So these pillows, I bought this Springbok hide when I was in Springfield. I'm thinking of every state but Missouri, and I went by Springfield Leather Company, and they had these Springbok hides, and I said, man, that'd be a neat hide to kind of try out and experiment with. And I figured I could get 2 pillows out of it, and so that's exactly what I did. This is how the hide was, with a little bit. This is all I could do. So, like I said, I call them accent pillows, but I think they turned out really neat. So I'm hoping when I get my fur back, I'm wanting to do some of the same stuff with my fur, in the line of trying to move towards creating a fur market for our southern fur, for my southern fur, and initially, probably, hopefully, it'll just be something that I can kind of do with my fur. But I'm probably getting the cart way ahead of the horse. But I have a bad problem with doing that with my mind and the way I think. But I would really like to be able to, eventually one day buy fur, because I feel like that's one thing that can impede folks from trapping, from actually starting, as people that are interested in trapping. If you can't figure out something to do with your fur, if you don't have anybody that's close and easy to sell your fur, then what's the point of trapping, right? and there have been grown walls, and NAFA have extended pickup dates into Georgia and most of the southern states, and I'm really thankful and appreciative of that. But it's going to be one weekend, or you probably going to have to drive, and so just trying to think of a way that I could try to encourage and maybe even develop a market for our southern furs, and really, if I could prioritize and had the possibility, being able to target especially kids. If kids are starting trapping, and some of the driver, at least for all of us, is probably the idea that at least we can kind of cover our expenses. Trapping is very intensive so far as time, so far as money. I mean, you got to be checking your traps every day. You got to make the investment of your traps and your vehicle and gas and all that. And so and I've heard so many stories of guys that started trapping, and they always, especially if they were young, and they would talk about, or somebody that used to go to a local fur buyer, and they talk about a kid coming in, and the fur buyer, giving the kid more than he would pay an adult, just to try to encourage that kid and try to get them hooked and keep them in. And that's where I'd really like to go. I'd really like to be at that position that I could help, whether it's a kid or adult, somebody to either get into trapping or stay involved and interested in trapping. And so, like I said, long story longer, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm still working with my leather. One thing that is really, I've got a lot of interest in is the beaver tails. Here's a couple of checkbook covers that I've just made. I'll ship them out this week. Turned out really nice. One thing that I've started doing with the beaver tails, I guess I'm kind of finding my style maybe, but I really like being able to incorporate the natural edge of that beaver tail into some of the work. And so that's what I've done with these checkbook covers, is just kept one edge of that beaver tail natural, and it's got the kind of the curve to it. I really like that. I think that turns out really sharp, and I've got some more in line, and I've got a pile of them in the fridge that I'm going to try to get skinned and salted and sent off to get tanned this weekend. So and like I said, hopefully I'll get my fur back soon, and I can start making some pillows. Another thing, in kind of keeping with the idea of the southern fur market, is trying to think of things that would be of use. Not that accent pillows are of great use to folks in the South, but a raccoon coat or any fur coat is pretty darn impractical in Georgia. The farther south of the Mason-Dixon line you get, the much less practical that a fur coat becomes. And so just trying to think of other options. One thing I've seen that I'm going to experiment with is some koozies, some canned koozies out of fur. I've seen a few online, like beaver can koozies, and so I think that'd be a neat thing. Pillows. So if you've got ideas on things like that, and I'd love to hear them. My mind, if y'all paid attention to this very long, if y'all been listening very long, you probably kind of picked up that, man, my mind is always rolling and wandering and thinking and coming up with the next 10 ideas, and I have to kind of rein my wife more than myself reins me in. But this has been my idea that I've kind of stuck with, and really want to make sure that I follow through, because I feel like this could have some impact and help trapping, and so that's what I'm after. So I will definitely keep you posted on that if you're interested in something. So I've had some people contact me about making things out of their hides, their beaver tails and things. I can definitely do that. If you're interested in something like that, shoot me an email, Chris, K-R-I-S, @coyotetrappingschool.com, or DM me or message me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Get a hold of me, and I'd love to talk with you about that. And I am going to offer up these Springbok pillows for a lot of times I wind up posting things on Instagram and Facebook before I post them. I get the video or podcast uploaded, just because it's so easy to snap a picture of my phone and post the picture. But I don't want to shortchange any of you folks that are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast and don't have a chance to get in on this. So I was going to offer up. I'm going to sell these pillows, and so I was going to offer up first dibs to any podcast listeners. If y'all are interested, message me, email me. I'll give y'all a couple days head start before I post them on social if anybody's interested. But they've got cloth backing, got a zipper. I've got them filled with polyfill. It's not the same that I pulled from under my trap pan, so don't worry. It's fresh and clean. But man, I'm really proud of them. I think they turned out really nice, and I really like the springbok. It's got the nice colors. Didn't get as much of the white, the size of it. I was limited there, but got a little white and the different colors. This is the upper, so this is more of the upper back, and then this pillow is getting down close to the tail, and you can see the kind of the white run down the middle. That's just, man, that's super sharp. I really like them. So hopefully y'all like them. You'll be interested. If you are, shoot me a message somehow. Let me know. I'm gonna do 65 a piece or 110 for both, and that's shipping included, free shipping on whatever. So hit me up if you're interested, and I definitely appreciate all the support from everyone that has reached out to me with whether it's the wallets or the trapping bags or whatever. I really appreciate that support, and all that goes to helping keep this thing rolling, helping keep the podcast and the YouTube channel and all that going, because I want to. Man, I love this community. I love trappers in general that are, everybody's focused on, it's more focused on others than self, and excuse me. So I really appreciate the trapping community, all that I've got from it, and so if you're interested in that or any of the other stuff, shoot me a message and let me know, and I'd love to hook you up with it. And any of my work that I sell, whether it's the trapping bags, leather stuff, pillows, whatever, I 100% lifetime guarantee, I guess. If you have any issues with it, let me know. Send it back to me. I'll make it right. I want to make sure. One thing that I like with my trapping bags, I haven't done it on any of this stuff because there's not a good place for it, but I've got some of those made in America tags or made in the USA tags that I put on every one of my trapping bags, and I take a lot of pride in that, and I want to, I want that to follow through. So I want any customers that are willing to shell out their hard-earned money to support me and what I'm doing and my family. I'm not going to forget you. So if you ever have any issues with any of that, you be sure to let me know and I'll get it right. So enough about that. That took way longer than I expected it to, but that's me. I'm a rambler, and this is something that really excites me, and so you get what you get. Moving on to the Master Wolfer book, James Lucero, Master Wolfer. Mr. Lucero, he's a New Mexico trapper. He's a Western trapper, and he's a predator control trapper. He's a full-time predator trapper. And I don't know how much he does now versus. This book was copyrighted in '88, so that's 30 years ago. I know that all too well. So I don't know how much he does now versus how much he did then. But the man, the book actually came with a letter from, back then it was the USDA ADC, I think, Animal Damage Control, but they were talking about M44s and different methods of controlling coyotes on livestock, with ranches and stuff with livestock out there, and they talked about Mr. Lucero, who had taken almost 1,300 coyotes in the previous 12 months with just foothold traps, not snares or M44s or coyote getters or anything like that, just foothold traps, and that got that got those guys' attention. Sure gets my attention, because anybody that's doing that knows a thing or two about catching coyotes. So I was really excited to get this book. Like I said, it came with a lot of recommendations. A lot of folks said that they had the book and liked it. So I'm just gonna. It's not as meaty of a book, I guess you could say, as like Clint Locklier's Eastern Wolfer or O'Gorman's Hoofbeats of a Wolfer book was. It's kind of more akin to some of the other trapping books. 55 pages is kind of a small format. So I'm not going to go as in depth as I did in some of those, but it's a really good. I think there's valuable stuff to get out of it, and I think to get anything out this or really any of the other, anything that you do, anything that you listen to, anything that you're reading, you got to have the right mindset. As trappers, I've talked about this before, but as trappers, we can't get into the rut of thinking that we know everything or just blowing things off because this is the way I've always done it, right? And I see that sometimes with, folks when I post, excuse me, when I make a post about something maybe a little bit different, or there's, even if it's not very different, I'll get folks that'll comment that, this is the way I do it, or this is the way I've always done it, or this has always been good enough for me. And a lot of times I don't engage with those people because those are the kind of people that you're not changing their mind. They're not interested in improving or bettering themselves or opening their minds. And so, but I hope if you're listening to this, you're interested in improving yourself as a trapper and as a general human being. I hope so. That's what why I listen to different podcasts and things. Not saying that I can help you become a better human being, maybe so, but so it's easy. One of the notes that I wrote down here is it's easy to get defensive about what you've always done, and so to me that's the key in some of these books. Is some of this stuff is contrary to what is taken for granted as good practices or ideal practices or whatever. And so from that standpoint, I think it's important to kind of keep an open mind and say, well, there's a reason. One thing, with this book, with O'Gorman's book especially, those guys, there's several others that are Western trappers that's their job is catching coyotes 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that's a huge difference from Chris Pope, who tries to catch coyotes, best case scenario, 3 months out of the year during trapping season. I'll trap some outside of that time frame for nuisance purposes and things, but that's not what pays the bills for me day in and day out. And so there is a difference, and O'Gorman, I think, alluded to it in it, or he outright said it in his book. He didn't pull any punches, but talking about people that, when you talk about years of experience, I can say I got 15 years of trapping experience, 20 years of trapping experience, but that's 15 years of 1 to 3 months of each year, versus these guys that's what they're doing day in and day out. That's 15 years or 30 years or 50 years of 365 days a year. So it's really, it's not an easy comparison. But I think that's important to point out, just because, especially us here in the East, there's not very many people, there's not a lot of need or demand for somebody doing full-time coyote control like there is, or more so there was, in the West with the big, especially sheep ranches and to some extent the cattle ranches and things. So I think that alone kind of sets these guys apart, and that's why I like to make sure that I'm thinking clean slate and I'm open to any ideas that are coming here. And there's some definitely totally different ideas that he laid out, the stuff that I've never really thought about before. So one of the number one tools that he lists when he starts naming off his tools is his drop cloth. And that's what, it's a 4x5, I think he uses canvas. He lays that out, and that's what he kneels on when he's setting his trap, but that's also what he puts all of his dirt on. So when he's digging his trap bed, he pulls all that dirt out, puts it on the drop cloth, uses what he needs to bed that trap back in. But then when he's done with the dirt and he's got dirt left over, you or me, I know you've seen me done it, you've probably done it too. I'll take my sifter full of dirt and I'll either throw it off behind me or throw it off in the bushes behind the set, just getting rid of it, And one of the things he says here is I blend in all my sets and carry all excess clods of dirt away from the set in my drop cloth. Boss dogs didn't become boss dogs by stepping in every fresh dirt pattern or walkway they came across. And that hit me, that hit me pretty good, because that makes a lot of sense. And you can say, and we can say, and it's easy to say, well, gotta leave some for seed anyway, right? But also, if we think back to Clint's book, and the focus on in the East, instead of taking the long line approach and just getting in, covering lots of ground, focusing on taking a higher percentage of fur predators coyotes per square mile, we may be, depending on factors like travel time, like land that we've got permission to trap on, things like that, a lot of times you may be better off trying to take more coyotes off of that piece of ground and try to take a couple and just keep moving. And so that means targeting those boss dogs, the ones that it's easy to say, well, leave him for seed. One thing he says here is that some trappers prefer not to use one, talking about a drop cloth, and never carry excess dirt away from the set. They claim it only takes 1 or 2 days for the disturbed clods of dirt to dry and everything to return to normal. Don't kid yourself. It does not look natural. And I was thinking about that, and thinking about his dirt hole set. And his dirt hole set is different than really any that I've seen or thought about. When he talks about his dirt hole set, and like he says here, he blends everything in. And even the dirt hole, he shows the dirt hole where he digs it. He puts all the dirt in a mound by the hole. He's got his trap offset, blended in so you can't see the trap. And then he actually covers the actual hole up. So he'll put his bait or lure bait down the hole, put a grass clump or something down the hole, and then sprinkle dirt, not heavy, but sprinkle dirt over the top of the hole to where the hole is not visible. And that's, I don't think that I've ever heard anybody, I don't recall ever hearing anybody talk about covering up their dirt hole once they get it in, But you think about the way that, a common dirt hole, so the dirt hole that one of my top viewed videos is the dirt hole set, right? And there's a trap pattern. You've got your hole, and then you've got this nice, freshly sifted dirt pattern right there in front of it. In a sense, you're drawing attention right to where your trap is, because that's where that fresh dirt is, And sure, there are coyotes that will ignore that. If your trap's bedded solidly and you've got a clean trap, you're not drawing the coyote's attention to the trap itself. You're still drawing the coyote to the hole and, your bait or lure, if it's a good bait, what's down the hole. But it's still, in thinking about it, trying to think about it from a coyote's perspective, a coyote that, has gone by that spot 1,000 times, just like, if it was in your living room, he knows that not only is that hole new, but that dirt pattern's new too. So, and don't get me wrong, I'm trying not to take all this stuff that I'm reading for the gospel and just run with it as blindly accepting what somebody else says. I have huge intentions of putting this stuff into action this trapping season to see, and I'm excited about it, because some of this stuff is totally different than anything that I've done before, and so it should be pretty easy to see if it's working or not. I can cover some of the same ground that I've been trapping and use these different techniques and see if it actually produces different results. So I'm really excited about that. And so, like I said, I'm just trying to keep an open mind and think about things, not taking all this stuff as the gospel, but thinking that it seems plausible that there's some validity to this, and just thinking about it further. And one thing that came to mind in thinking about this and thinking about blending your set in, thinking about the dirt hole, again, blending your set in, even covering the hole itself up, is there's a good bit of research talking about neophobia with coyotes, and the idea that, I guess I should bear with me here. I was just going to look up a definition so I could. Extreme or irrational fear or dislike of anything new or unfamiliar. So, fear of things new or unfamiliar. And there's a good bit of older research about that. You know, from decades ago, the federal government put a lot of money into catching coyotes, and they were doing a lot of different experiments. And so, this one study, this by Harris, on trying to pull the name of it. It was published in 1983, and it's by Charles Harris, Differential Behavior of Coyotes with Regard to Home Range Limits. And so I flagged a couple things, and I want to delve a little bit more into this because I know there's other different papers, and this paper actually references some of those papers. But I thought some of this stuff was kind of played right into what we're talking about here. And the overall gist, I didn't print off the whole thing's like 70 pages long. And if you've ever read scientific papers, it's like gouging an eye out with a spoon. I mean, it's not very intriguing or interesting reading. But a lot of times you can read the abstract, so the first paragraph that'll give you a summary, and then you can jump right to the discussions or conclusions pages and get what you want to out of it. I should have printed more of this just so I have a little bit more information, but in this study they were actually putting scent stations in. And what these scent stations are is they will, I think it's usually like a 3-foot square area or probably 1 meter with a research bent area where they put sand. I think it's when I've been involved with putting them in when I was in college, it was sand with mineral oil mixed in to where it would hold the tracks well. And they've got these little scent tabs that are made up of like compressed fish oil or something like that. They'll sit right in the middle, and then they'll just run it kind of like a trap line every day and look for and identify the tracks that are in the pattern. And so that's what they're doing here. That's what the research was on. Is with this particular one is on some wild coyotes and some pen raised coyotes, but this, just taking a few excerpts out of this to kind of give you the gist of it. In this particular instance, they're talking about resident animals, so resident free-range animals, coyotes. They may initially avoid the scent stations in a familiar environment until some degree of habituation has occurred. So they're talking about, and that comes up several times in this, and from different studies, that coyotes in their own home range are not very likely to check out something new until it's been there a little while and they've gotten used to it. And I think you and I have seen this played out on our trap lines pretty regularly, you know. We've all seen instances where, sure, you can make those first night catches and second night catches sometimes, but usually it takes, 3 to 4 days before that trap line really starts clicking when you're talking coyotes especially. And I think that's exactly what it's getting at here is those coyotes, if you're in their home range where they know every stick and nook and cranny, and they come by and they see something new, I'll check it out next week after I know it's been there and it's not harmful. So here's another, this is from a different study which I need to look up. It's Griffith study from 1976. Estimated that only 29% of the coyotes that approached within 30 feet of scent stations visited scent stations. The odor and or visual aspects of the dusted scent station attract some animals, but it seems more likely that wary individuals would avoid the disturbed ground, at least initially. What are we talking about with our dirt hole sets and our dirt patterns? Disturbed ground that those coyotes may be initially shying away from. I'm not sure if I highlighted it in this one, but it's talking a lot about familiar and unfamiliar, And I think it also kind of plays in with some of the stuff that's in this book about juvenile versus adult or dominant coyotes. That, and Clint talked about it, that, you know, those dirt holes, you're going to catch coyotes in them. A lot of times they're going to be your younger coyotes. Your older coyotes are going to pick up in flat sets and things like that. And that just feeds right in this too. Here we're talking about this is a study, Hibbler from 1977. He hypothesized coyotes in unfamiliar environments might be more attentive to stimuli and investigate and explore such areas more thoroughly. Welker in 61 found most animals become more attentive in unfamiliar environments. So coyotes that are patrolling outside of their home range are a lot more likely to investigate a fresh dirt hole or a fresh lure smell than coyotes that are in their home range. And it made me think about the podcast we did with Jeff Haggerty, where he was talking about the farm where he caught 47 coyotes in one farm. Undoubtedly, that's a travel way, a major travel route for those coyotes. And I would assume that, I don't know where or how those coyotes are going, but that's probably outside of most of their home ranges, but for whatever reason they're traveling through there. So their guard may be down initially just from they're not as familiar with that environment. They haven't run by that intersection twice a night for the last week and seen that there was nothing there, and then all of a sudden there's this crazy hole with some weird skunk smell coming out of it. So they're more likely to investigate because they don't know whether it's been there for a month or it's been there 2 hours. That made me think of situations like that where you get if you can find those travel corridors for the transient coyotes, so to speak, the coyotes that are searching for a home range. They're not really familiar with the area, so they're less likely to be cautious, I guess you could say. Just got a couple more here. So here, Griffith in 76 found 12% of the coyotes in his study passed within 1.5 to 4.5 feet of a scent station without scoring, without putting their foot in the track area. And an additional 35% passed within 7.5 to 16.5 feet without scoring. So there, you've got 47% of coyotes that are running down a road, and there's something that should catch their attention and that they should smell and want to investigate right there within 15 feet of them. 50% of them never check up, never even look twice. So that highlights the effect, and we don't know how wind and all this stuff played into these things, but that highlights the impact of being right on that travel way. But 12% passed right on by within 5 feet. But 12% is a lot better than 35%. So anything that we can do to increase our odds of catching that coyote's attention is, and I guess in a sense, catching his attention without drawing his attention to certain places. It's kind of a fine line there. That's what makes it so much fun, right? Lastly here, and this is not a large sample, but let's see. 1 of 5 and 3 of 9 marked coyotes in these studies respectively visited scent stations within the standard 4-night survey period. So 1 coyote out of 5 and 3 coyotes out of 9 visited the scent stations within 4 nights. 0 of 5 and 1 of 9 visited scent stations on the first night. So there's undoubtedly there's factors at play there too, because they may not have just come by the first night. But you've also got the fact that the neophobic fact, or what's the word I'm thinking of? Potential there of the coyote that came by, but it was too new that he wasn't willing. He didn't see it worth the risk of going up and checking it out. So that jumps into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which he goes in and he talks about several different sets. Overall, I think this book is worth the money if you're willing to kind of think outside of the box. And this is not crazy outlandish stuff to think about, but it is different. But one of the first sets that he talks about is the blind set, and we talked about that with Jeff Haggerty, talking about that's a favorite set of his, a true, and he's talking about, Mr. Lucero's talking about a true blind set. He talks about finding a coyote track, putting a stick in the ground where that track is, right in the center of that foot, and that's where you're going to bed your trap. Blend it in, and that's it. You're walking away. In Clint Locklear's book, he talked about blind sets, and he it wasn't what I would say is a true blind set. And I guess I'd say that I think I may have had a little bit of a misconception about blind sets, or I've never really given blind sets much consideration, because in my mind I always pictured, something that's in a cattle trail. So something where the trail's this big, it's well defined, and so it's just a matter of that game is running that trail in that little 6-inch area. So just setting putting your trap in there and using a little bit of a guide or something and getting the step right there. But really, blind sets don't have to be in that perfect of a scenario to actually work and effectively work. It makes me think about, I've read a lot of articles about wolf trappers in Alaska, and how and it makes a little bit more sense up there than here, but how they would find a wolf track going through the snow, and they'd actually dig down and set the trap under the snow in exactly the hole where that wolf leg and foot went down in, which part of it makes sense there, more so that they're going to use the same holes because it's easier than breaking new trail, right? We don't have that here. It's just as easy to step 6 inches one way or the other on a dirt road with not feet of snow. But you may be actually, coyotes put his foot there once. In some instances, that may be better odds than having your trap, with a bait and lure set right off on the edge. So what I was getting to is, Jeff and Mr. Lucero were talking about blind sets in my mind in a purest sense of no attractions, no anything. And Clint Locklear, he talked about blind sets more so. In my opinion, I guess it's not what I would consider a truly blind set. He talked about maybe putting in a set, blending it in, and then scattering some scraps of something, or something where there's still an attractant kind of in the area, not in the general area of right behind the trap, so you get the coyote's attention at least working around the area, and hopefully still odds of bumping in that trap regardless. And then in Craig O'Gorman's book, one of his sets that he's known for is his Mafia set that he came up with, and that's traps in a trail, but actually using a piece of scat with some urine and stuff on it as a stopper, as something to get a coyote's attention, make them slow down, and hopefully get in your trap. So, and Mr. Lucero does talk about trying to break a coyote's stride and he said he typically tries to stay like 15 feet away from the trap, and maybe he'll put a stick in the trail so that the coyote's running, he's got to kind of check up, cross the stick, and then pick back up. So the blind set is definitely something I'm going to put more focus and more effort into doing this season, just because some of the best trappers that I've talked to lately or read through lately definitely seem to lean toward and use a blind set with regularity and with success. So let's see. One thing, and like I said, this is not as big of a book as some of the others, and so I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to give too much stuff away. I think it's definitely worth the read. I think it's definitely worth it. It's $35 and it's a 55-page book. So seems like a lot, but man, if you can catch 2 coyotes off of some of the tactics that come from it, it's worth it. Yeah. And in today's market, if you're in a good coyote fur area, 1 coyote's more than paid for this book. So I would encourage you. One of the neat things that he talked about was urine usage and call lure usage, and I'll just say it's in a different location than where you would typically put urine. And so there's a lot more to it than what I talked about, but I wanted to hit on a couple of key points that I hope will get you intrigued enough to maybe write in and get you a copy to go through and hopefully help make you a better coyote trapper. So it's pretty neat to get something with personalized and I think you would definitely. I think it's worth the money, and you'll get something out of it if you put the things that it talks about into use, or at least into consideration. So that's going to wrap it up. The next book that I'm working on I'm going to start on is Clint Locklear's Mindset of a Professional, and I'm pretty excited about this. Just like I said, I'm realizing more and more lately that there's so much that revolves around our mindset. So much is predicated on our mindset and how we think about things. I had a situation just this week that really got me to thinking, and I do some nuisance trapping on the side as well, and so I had a call. It was actually about a guy. I wasn't sure whether it was a coyote or a fox, but kind of encountering kind of semi-aggressive towards people in this neighborhood, and so I went and took a look out at it and kind of got in my mind what it was going to take. And I got a good friend of mine that I talk with about all kinds of stuff, and so I was kind of running it by him. He's in a different industry, but I was kind of running it by him as to what I was thinking so far as charging wise, the time it would take me and stuff like that. And I've talked about it on here before, and there's a lot of different ways you can charge, and you got to come up with what's right for you. But the way that I have been charging, depending on the job, is usually lately I'll do like a setup fee and then a daily rate. And the tough thing about, or I don't want to say the tough thing. Again, it's all about mindset. So I was telling my friend this. I'll get right to it. I was telling my buddy this, and talking about the daily rate. He's like, "Well, how long is it going to take you?" Well, I'd like to say it's going to take one night, but it could take a week. I mean, especially dealing if it's a coyote, you never know how it's going to play out. And so I told him my setup, and he said, "So wait a minute." He said, "If you go out there and you catch whatever it is, coyote, fox, whatever, on the first night, that would be like an outstanding job, right?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I would consider that a definite success. If I go out there, set traps the very next day, I catch a coyote, I would definitely be ecstatic, and I think the homeowner and the homeowners association would too." And he's like, "All right," he said, so what you're saying is, the better job you do, the less you're going to get paid." I got thinking about that, and I mean that's exactly how it works out. And that's how I have portrayed it to the customers, is and I can't say where I'm at on this exactly. I'm still sorting it out, but it really did get me to thinking, and I think as trappers, or myself anyways, and we've talked about it before, but a lot of times I think we have a hard time asking for what we are really worth, honest to goodness, from our time perspective and our experience and what we know how to do. And and I, when he said that, I mean, I try to make excuses and try to justify it in my mind, and but I mean, that's the reality. He said, me personally, and everybody's different on this, but he's like, I'd rather you just tell me, look, it's going to be X amount of money for 6 nights, and that's it. And I'm having a hard time. I'm spitballing now, so that I pause more when I when I get done with my outline. If you hadn't figured that out, and I'm kind of going off script here, but I'm trying to get back to the mindset of a professional, and some of the, I guess, the summary or whatever that you read when you're reading, what books are about and all. Clint talks about that. Some of his other books, he talks about his clients. For his predator control group, they're high-end clients. They're folks that they expect results, and they're paying well for those results, and that's really and truly, that's what business is all about, right? Finding the right client that values your service. And I catch myself a lot, not necessarily in the moment, but thinking back about it, and especially after he said that in my mind, I'm trying to kind of justify my pricing to the client, when in reality, if it's the right client that values my service, if I come in there and catch, a coyote on the first night, I want them, they're going to be just as happy to pay me that, a full amount versus, a little amount, because it took me less time. And there's all kinds of factors that play into that too, right? Because, say I do catch that coyote on the first night. I'm totally new to the situation. It's dry as a bone. There's pine trees and pine straw and leaves. I don't know if there's 2 coyotes, if there's 3 coyotes, if there's just one. So I'm not going to pull that trap the first night. Maybe I catch a double the first night. That's the ambiguity that as trappers you kind of get in a tough place with, because you're dealing with people that expect results, but you also don't know how long it could take. Just you going in there and setting traps could spook that coyote out of there for 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 weeks. And so I'm anxious to get into this, because I think the mindset piece is really critical and really important, not only from a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. Knowing what you're worth and feeling comfortable asking for that, feeling comfortable telling somebody, hey, this is what this job is going to cost, and you are going to be happy with it when I'm done. And knowing that if that person says no, you know what, they're probably not the right client for you. But when that person shakes your hand, you still got the weight on your shoulders that you've got to produce and perform. But whether that job takes 1 day or whether it takes 6 days, that client's going to be just as happy that, hey, you fixed my problem. I am happy to pay you this amount. So anyway, we'll see if all that, I don't know if all that's wrapped up in this book or not. I'm excited about getting into it and kind of getting that perspective on it. But that was really something that, when he said that to me, it really it got me thinking and processing things totally different, because like I said, I know I'm not the only one that a lot of times we struggle with that, and like I said, I know I have done that, been doing that, of trying to justify, and even laying out for certain, if I get a call, and you can kind of tell, how people are going to lean, even sometimes just talking to them. And I'll get a call, and I got a call just the other day, and the guy was having raccoons coming up right after dark eating his cat food. Family of raccoons, like a mama and 3 little ones, and he was asking, trying to get an idea of what it's going to cost. And so I said, well, I usually charge the setup fee and then, so much a day. I said, and trying to justify it, and probably maybe in some people's mind reducing my professionalism, saying that, the daily rate is only, if I have to come. So if you are there and willing to check the traps, and you can let me know, then I don't have to come, and that'll save you. For some people that works out all right, but there again, that's not for everybody. And there's a lot of people, depending on where you're at, there's people that don't, they don't want to hassle with that. They'd rather pay you that daily rate every day to come check them versus, going out there and looking and see if there's a raccoon in the trap or not. So again, it just reiterated to me the importance of knowing your customer, knowing your target audience, and that's your customer, and it's all right when people say no, you're crazy, that costs too much or whatever, because you know what, they weren't right for you, and that probably wasn't going to be a good fit. So anyway, I hope that made sense. I hope that, like I said, that really, and me and him have talked about it before, and it's never been articulated like that, but that was really kind of profound to me, and so I'm definitely thinking on that too. So anyway, I'll wrap this up. I don't know how long this lasted. We're pushing an hour, I guess. So good. Everybody says most people say they like my longer episodes, so this will be a longer episode. I didn't think it was going to be that long just because of the book and my notes weren't that long. But anyway, one last plug. If you're interested, shoot me a note somehow and get a hold of me if you're interested in these custom Springbok made in the USA accent pillows. Or if you're interested in something made with my beaver tails or yours, let me know, and I'd be tickled to death to help you out if I can. And so with that, I'm going to let y'all go. Y'all have a good day, and we'll catch you next time.